begin the Mishnah on Taf Lametes Amud Aleph. Zok the Mishnah. Ve'elu yerakis she'adam yaitze ben yidei chayvase bePesach. These are the vegetables that could be used for the mitzvah of Marer on Pesach. Chazeres, lettuce or romaine lettuce, betamche, horseradish, or what we call in Yiddish chrein, bechar chavina, which the Gemara will say is some kind of a growth around a palm tree, be'ulshin with endives, u'b'marer, and with bitter herbs. So there's actually a machlekes Rishonim, what it means when it says in the Mishnah b'marer. Some Rishonim say the meaning of marer means any vegetable that has a bitter taste to it. That's why we're not referring to any specific vegetable. Others say no. Rashi actually says marer refers to a specific kind of a plant. Do they translate it over there in the Hard Scroll? No. But Rashi does give a name for a specific plant that it's referring to. It's a specific bitter herb. And in Shulchan Aruch, both opinions are brought. There's one opinion in Shulchan Aruch which the Mechaber says that the Mishnah here is not talking about anything. When it says marer, it's something specific. But then the Ramah says if you don't have any of these kinds that the Mishnah mentions, you can just use any vegetable that has a bitter taste to it, and you'll be yaitze the mitzvah of marer. Yaitzin ben, you yaitze with the marer, ben lachin, whether it's moist, ben yeveshin, whether it's dried up. Avaloi kvushin, you're not yaitze marer if it's kvushin, if it's pickled, right? Very good. V'loi shlukin, not if it's heavily boiled and it dissolves in the water. V'loi mevushalin, and not even if it's cooked. The reason is because the point of the mitzvah of marer is not just to eat the marer, but the taste of the marer. The whole thing is to remind us of the bitterness that eaten at Mitzrayim. So the mitzvah of marer is the taste, which is the difference between the mitzvah of marer and matzah. By matzah, if a person just swallows the matzah, doesn't taste the matzah at all, he's yaitze. By matzah, the point is not the taste. By marer, the mitzvah is dafka the taste. So therefore, if it's cooked and the bitterness goes out, then you're not yaitze the mitzvah. Mitzdarf and lekazayis, the various different kinds that were mentioned here, can be combined together to the shear that you need for marer, which is a kazayis. So the Mishnah here is telling you that you need to have a kazayis to fulfill the mitzvah of marer, and you can use the different kinds to combine this together. So why do you need a kazayis for marer? So simply the reason is, just like every other mitzvah that's eating, the shear always is a kazayis. However, there are opinions, there's a famous Rosh that says over here that really for marer you shouldn't need a kazayis. Only reason the Rosh says you need a kazayis is because of the bracha. What's the bracha that you make on marer? Al achilas marer, to eat marer. So because that's the nusach of the bracha, al achilas marer, so therefore you need a kazayis. But otherwise you wouldn't need a kazayis. Why wouldn't you need a kazayis? So there's a famous hezber from Reb Chaim Brisker. He said, because when the pasuk says al matzos u'merodim yechluhu, the whole obligation of eating marer is as a side dish together with the Korban Pesach. It's not a mitzvah to eat it for itself. It's there to come along with the Korban Pesach. When the Torah says the lashon achila on something itself, then there's the mitzvah that has to be dafka kazayis. But when it says in the Torah al matzos u'merodim yechluhu, what is the yechluhu referring to? To eat the Korban Pesach along with marer. So not necessarily would it have to be a kazayis. Therefore the Rosh says the only reason it has to be a kazayis is because of the bracha. But most Rishonim say that the reason why the marer has to be a kazayis is just like any other mitzvah, that when you eat it, the achila, the term achila in Torah, that doesn't just mean less than a kazayis is like tasting something. When you eat something, it has to be dafka kazayis. V'yaitzin bekelach shalahen, you're also yaitze the mitzvah of marer with the stalk of these vegetables. Ubidmai, and also you can use demai, which is marer that comes from vegetables that's mixed. The demai means it comes from an amaretz, and it's not sure that all the trumas and maises were taken from it. Ubimai serishin shenitla trumasai. You have mai serishin of a Levi, and he separated the truma for the kayin. Umai sesheni vehektish sheniftu, or mai sesheni and hektish that were fully redeemed. So then you could use it for the mitzvah of marer as well. So here, the first part of the Gemara, it's going to go through the meaning of what these vegetables are, and it's going to add some more options of different names of vegetables of what you can use for marer. Chazeres, sagt the Gemara. What is chazeres? Chasa, lettuce, romaine lettuce. In the lashon of the Rishonim or the Pesachim, they call this salat. That's the lashon that's brought.
Because in French it's salat.
That's what it is in French. Okay, so that's the way it's brought in many of the Pesachim. Yeah. Ulshin. What are ulshin? Hindivi, which are, as I mentioned, endives. Yeah. They have them in the store before Pesach. Yes. Tamche, horseradish, chrein. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, tamchase shma. In Aramaic, it's tamchase. Char chavina, what's this? Amar Rab Shimon ben Lakish, atzvase de dikla. It grows around the palm tree. It's a plant that grows around the palm tree. Ubemare, the last thing in the Mishnah was marer, mirirta. That's mirirta. Which, as I mentioned, it's machlokes whether this refers to any vegetable that's bitter, or Rashi does give a name, and a French name for some vegetable. I don't know what it is.
Bitter leaves.
Some bitter leaves, okay. Tani bakapara. So the Gemara brings more braises that mentions what marer is and some more names of things. Tani bakapara elu yerakais. These are the vegetables. Shadam yetze ben yidei chavasa bepesach ba'olshin betamche, and then it adds another thing becharchelin. Rashi says we don't know what this is. Bechar chavinin and char chavinin. That's what we said before. That's what grows around the tree of a palm tree. Or bechazrin, which is the chazeres, the lettuce. Rabbi Yehuda Oime af ulshei soda. You can also use wild endives. And volshei gine, the endives that grow in a garden. The chazeres, and you could also use the chazeres, the lettuce. So the Gemara says ulshei gine v'chazeres. Rabbi Yehuda is saying you could also use the endives, the regular endives in a garden, or you could use the chazeres, lettuce. Hatana lereisha. That says in the reisha already. Tanakama said that. What's Rabbi Yehuda adding? Hachikama. This is how you have to read what Rabbi Yehuda said. Af ulshei sadeh ko ulshei gine v'chazeres. What he's adding is even the wild endives could be used like the garden endives and the lettuce. He's just comparing them. That's how you have to read them. Rab Meir, the Braisa there continues, and Rab Meir gives names of other vegetables. Af asfis v'tura umar yiruar. Also these other vegetables, asfis and tura, mar yiruar. Rashi says mine yirakas, other kinds of bitter vegetables. Amale Rabbi Yosi says to Rab Meir, asfis v'tura echadu. They're both the same vegetable. Umar zehu yiruar. Mar is yiruar. Also, these two are the same, and those two are the same. Another brayse the Gemara brings, Tana de Beis Shmuel, Elu yirakas shadam yetz bein dei chavasa bepesach. The following vegetables you can be yetz the mitzvah of marer: chazeres with the romaine lettuce, ba'ulshin endives, betanchem, the horseradish, becharvinin, the growth around the palm tree, becharginin. This is another vegetable that we didn't mention before. Not sure what charginin is. Rashi doesn't say. They have a translation there for that.
No.
Behardufnin.
Oregano. I'm sorry.
Charginin is oregano. And hardufnin is what? Hardufnin, Rashi says also a French name for it.
Absent.
Okay. Rabbi Yehuda says av chazeres yulin v'chazeres galin. Various different kinds of lettuce. When it's called chazeres, they have like today you have there's a romaine lettuce, an iceberg lettuce. So it's over here the Gemara says it's chazeres yulin, chazeres galin. So Rashi explains that the chiddush over here is there's what's called plain chazeres, that's its name, chazeres, and then there has a name as an additional name. See, that could also be used. Kayetze ben has the same halacha, you could also use it. Rabbi Loi Yoime Mishum Rabbi Eliezer Af Arkebalim. You could use Arkebalim, which Rashi says is the same as what was mentioned before, Char Chavina. It's just a different name for it. V'chazarti al kol talmidov. Rabbi Loi said, I heard this from Rabbi Eliezer, and I asked all of his students, I wanted to find a colleague, somebody that should say that he heard this from Rabbi Eliezer. I didn't find anyone else that heard this from Rabbi Eliezer. When I came to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, he agreed to me and said that you can use arkebalim, which is the charchavina, for mara. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol sheyesh le'saraf. You could use any vegetable that has a sap in it for mara. When you squeeze it, it comes out like a sap. Rashi says similar to like a milk that comes out, could be used for mara. Rabbi Yechanan ben Breika, Kol shepanav machsifin. It should be the green vegetables. They should be a little bit light green, not dark green like, for example, leek, but it should be a lighter green. All these vegetables mentioned in the Mishnah have a little bit of a lighter green to them. Acherim say kol yerek mar. All these bitter herbs that we're mentioning here, yesh le'saraf. They have both. They have a sap in it, and also a pon of machsifin, and they have a lighter green. And that's what's a sign that this could be used for marar. From what they all said, we learn yerek mar yesh le'saraf a pon of machsifin, that these bitter herbs here, the bitter vegetables, have a sap in it, and also have a light color to it, a lighter green, and therefore that's a sign that it's marar. We paskin like a chedim. Ravina ashkeche. So now the Gemara is going to discuss another interesting question. Out of all of these different meaning of mother, so the Mishnah mentioned 5 of them. In the Gemara there was another few. What's the one that you should use the best? What's the best out of all of them? So Ravina ashkeche l'Ravacha bereid Rava. The have mahadar merirta. He was trying to find specifically merirta, which was actually the last mention in the Mishnah, which the Mishnah called mother. Why was he looking for merirta? Amalei, so he asked him, my daitech, why are you looking for merirta? The merirta and tfei, because it's the most bitter of all of these vegetables. That's why it's called merirta, because it's actually more bitter. But he asked him, but in the Mishnah it says chazeres first. If the Mishnah puts that first, doesn't that mean that that would be the best? And all v'tana de Shmuel chazeres. When Shmuel brought the different meaning, he also put chazeres first. V'amar Abayshia, and Abayshia clearly said mitzvah b'chazeres. Even though you can use any of them, but it's a mitzvah to use the chazeres first, better than all of them. And the Gemara here explains the reason. V'amar Rava, my chazeres. There's another name for chazeres? Chasa. Chasa is the lettuce. What is the meaning of the name Chasa? My Chasa, the Chas Rachmana Ilavan, that the Eibush had mercy upon us. See, even while you're eating the mother, commemorating the bitterness that Yidden had over there, we're also remembering the Rachmanas that the Eibush had on us. Another reason the Gemara says, V'amar Rab Shmuel ben Achmeni Amar Rab Yenison, Lema Nimshlu Mitzrayim, to what are the Mitzrayim compared to? The way they subjugated the Yidden. Kemara, like mother. What's the comparison to mother? To tell you, ma mother is just like with mother. In the beginning, when it starts growing, so it's soft. But the soifei kasha, you take the romaine lettuce, it has a hard stalk. That's what Rashi says. It refers to the hard stalk when it grows and it becomes ripe. So it becomes hard. Af mitzrayim tchilasan raka. In the beginning, they were soft to Yidden. They told Yidden, "We'll pay you. We're hiring you as workers to build these cities." But the Seifan Kasha. And then they made them work very hard and they didn't pay them anything and they made them work, they worked them to the bone. So therefore the mother, specifically the lettuce, the chazeres, which begins soft and becomes hard, has a hard stalk, so it hints to the way the Yidden worked in Mitzrayim. So Malay, so he heard this, Rav Acha Bereid Rava heard what Ravina said, Hadribi. I retract what I was doing, and he started taking dafka the chazeres, the romaine lettuce. Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch actually, interesting, he brings this lahalacha and he compares it to an esrog. He says, just like by an esrog, you can buy any esrog to be yotze the mitzvah, but there's a halacha of zek keli v'amveyo, a hidden mitzvah, to buy a nice esrog. So he says the same thing over here also with mother. The Mishnah brings the lists of all these different vegetables of mother, and soon the Gemara is going to say, because it says in the Torah meroirim, it says in the Torah meroirim with a plural term. That's how we see already from the pasuk that more than one type of bitter herb could be used. But nevertheless, there's a hidden mitzvah. The hidden mitzvah is to use dafka the lettuce, because the lettuce presents not only the bitterness but also the details of the chmanas of the Eibishter and how the Eden worked in the Mitzrayim. So therefore, this is a hidden mitzvah of zek keli v'amveyu. Amalei Rabba Barav Chonin la'abaye eime marer chad. Maybe marer is, when the Torah says the mitzvah of marer, there's just one marer, just like an esrog. You don't have an option. When the Torah says pri eitz hadar, there isn't an option of different kinds of beautiful fruits. There's one pri eitz hadar. And the same thing with all the daled minim. So maybe we should say the same thing with marer. So he says, but meraydim. The Torah uses a plural term, meraydim. Meraydim today. Maybe meraydim only refers to two different kinds of vegetables. Says the Gemara, no, dumya de matzah. We compare matzah to matzah. Ma matzah minin harba. Just like with matzah, there are 5 grains you could bake the matzah from. Af matzah minin harba. So to matzah, that is, it could be made, it comes from more than one vegetable. So it's interesting, taka de matzah is made from 5 different grains. Could be made from any of these 5 grains. And the Mishnah also mentions 5 different minim for the matzah, corresponding to the matzah. These vegetables that are mentioned here, that you can do the mitzvah of marer with it, they could all be planted in one patch in a field. So the Gemara says, what does this mean? Lemeimre, should you say that what he means to say is the less bahu mishum klayim? All these different kinds of vegetables could be mixed with each other. There's no klayim in them. How could this be? Masav Rav asked the question, what does it say in the Mishnah of Klayim? Chazeres v'chazeres galin. These are 2 kinds of lettuce. One has an added name of chazeres galin.
Skip something? Yeah, I think so.
What did I skip? I don't think so. Oh, before I skipped something. Okay, sorry about that. So I have to go up before. Amalei Rav Rechumi la Abaye. No, that's what I skipped. Okay, so we're going to go back before, sorry. Okay, yeah, I skipped from one dot to another dot here in this Gemara. There's dots. Amalei Rav Rechumi la Abaye. Rav Rechumi said to Abaye, Mimai the high mother min yereku. Oh, there's a more basic question here. How do I b'chlal know when the Torah says to eat mother that it refers to a vegetable? Eime mirir to the kufya. Maybe this is a bitter part from a kind of fish. B'chlal not a vegetable. Answers the Gemara, dumya de matzah. No, I compare mother to matzah. Ma matzah gidule karka, just like matzah is made from what grows from the ground. Af mother gidule karka. Mother comes from what grows from the ground. But the Gemara still asks, ve'eme hirduf. Maybe this is not a vegetable, maybe it's hirduf. What's hirduf? Rashi says that this is a piece of wood that's very bitter. This is, Rashi brings from the Medrash, that this is the story that when Yidden came out of Mitzrayim and then they came into the Midbar and they didn't have any sweet water. The water was very bitter that they found. Moshe Rabbeinu threw in a piece of wood and the water became sweet. And Rashi says over there was a nes b'toich nes, that he took a bitter piece of wood and that sweetened the water. So maybe over here, when we're talking about the mitzvah of mother, it's referring to this hirduf. Who says it's a plant, it's a vegetable? Again, the Gemara says, Dumya de matzah. We compare it to matzah. Matzah means royim, just like matzah is something that you plant in the ground, grows, like a plant. Av mother means royim, what you plant, not a piece of wood. Ve'ema harzifu. Maybe it's harzifu. Harzifu, Rashi says, is something that's a food that grows that's very bitter, and it's actually poisonous. Not for human beings, but for animals, that's poisonous. Maybe that's what it refers to. It has to be like really bitter, something that has a poisonous part to it. Again, the Gemara says, no, dumya de matzah, we compare the mother to matzah. Ma matzah shenikachas bekesef meiser. Just like matzah, you could only use for matzah something that you can buy from meiser, or matzah is something that you can buy with the money of meiser. Av mother shenikach bekesef meiser. Mother, you could only use something that you could buy for meiser. As Rashi says, this food, this hirzuf, which is poisonous, you can't use for kesef. You can't buy meiser with it because it's not a proper food. Meiser, you could only buy something which is a proper food. So therefore, it can't be used for the mitzvah of mother. Okay, so we learned already the next part of the Gemara where it explains that because it says meroirim loshen rabim, and we learn from matzah that it's minim harbe. Okay, then the Gemara, let's start again. Omar Rabbi Baravuna Marav Yerakas She'omru Chachamim She'adam Yetzvim Dechavasa BePesach Kulon Nizram Ba'aruga Achas. They could all be planted in one patch. Lememre, does this mean the lesbo mishum kalayim? That there's no kalayim by any of this minim? Masav Raves, Rava asked, it says Chazeres or Chazeres Galin. The two kinds of lettuce. One is plain Chazeres, another is called Chazeres Galin. They could be planted together. Ulshin v'ulshei soda. The regular endives and the wild endives, they could also be planted together. Kreishin v'kreishi soda, leek, and the wild leek could be planted together. Kuzber v'kuzber soda, coriander and wild coriander could also be planted together. Chardal v'chardal mitzri, different kinds of mustard could also be planted together. Dalas hamitzri v'harmutza, different kinds of dalas, which is pumpkins. There's different translations for dalas. So they could also be planted together. Einam klayim zebezeh. So all of these are not kalayim, they can be planted together. So what do we see from this Mishnah? Chazeres v'chazeres galin. So for example, the two kinds of chazeres, they could be planted together. In that, yes. Chazeres v'ulshin, but planting a lettuce together with endives, that no, law, you can't plant them together. So how could Rav say that all these kinds in the Mishnah, there's no kalayim and you can plant them together? Maybe we have to read this Mishnah and Kalayim differently. The Mishnah here is saying that all of these meaning could be planted together. Chazeres, Galin, Ulshin, Ulshisada. Maybe all of them could be planted together. So Gemara says that's not the pshat of that Mishnah. Rav said, Zugais Katani. In that Mishnah it's only saying two. These two and these two and these two, that they could be planted together because they're the same kind. But not that everything in the Mishnah could be planted together. So the Gemara explains, mine is Ra and Amar Rav. When Rav says that all the kinds of the Mishnah could be planted together in one patch, what did he mean? Nizran kil chasan. They can be planted in one patch in the field, but it has to be separated one from another, the way the halacha demands. So frek the Gemara, that's what Rav was saying. Kil chasan, Tanina. That's a clear Mishnah. What does it say in the Mishnah? Aruga shisha al shisha tfachim. When you have a patch in the field that's 6 by 6 tfachim, Zayrim b'teicha, chamisha zerainin. You could plant in it 5 different plants, 5 different seeds. Arba al arba ruchais. You separate them. You have one seed you can plant on each of the 4 corners. arba ruchas haruga, va'achas be'emtza, and another seed right in the center. But you can't plant them together. If there's 6 by 6 tvachim, so that's enough space to separate from one from another, so they shouldn't nourish from one each other. The roots shouldn't nourish from one each other. So you could only, this is the way you plant it. So the Mishnah clearly tells me how they are to be planted in one patch. So what was Rav's chiddush b'chlal? Mao, so the Gemara answers, the chiddush is as follows. Mao deteim hanim mili bizrayin. Maybe what the Mishnah says there is talking about seeds that you plant. Aval b'yerakis, when you're planting vegetables, not seeds, loy. So maybe then you're not allowed. Maybe vegetables, they nourish from each other even further, and therefore they can't be planted at all in the same patch, even with this separation. Kamashmalon, that was the chiddush of Rav, that it's not only by the seeds, but it's even by the vegetables. Frek the Gemara, wait a minute, are you telling me that vegetables are a bigger problem with klayim than it is with seeds? Vegetables nourish from each other even more, but we learned the opposite. Lememra the yerakis alima mizraim. When it comes to vegetables, the problem of klayim is stronger than it is with seeds. But vatnan, we learned in the mission of klayim. What does it say? They're kol minei zraim ein zayrim baruga achas. It's the seeds that you can't plant in one patch. Kol minei yerakis zayrim baruga achas. It's only vegetables that you could plant in one patch together. So you see over here that the contrary is true. Vegetables nourish from each other. They have smaller roots, and therefore they nourish from each other less. It's dafka seeds that the roots grow bigger and nourish from each other more. Answers the Gemara. So we're going to have to say different. Mao the Teime, I would think to say hani moray, these minim of moray that were mentioned here, min zroinino. They're not regular plants. They're not like regular vegetables. They are seeds that are planted, and therefore they could be planted together in one patch. Kamash malon zroim. So therefore, what Rav is teaching me is that they are zroim. That they're not these vegetables. The minim of the moray that I mentioned in the Mishnah are not plants. They're not vegetables. They're seeds. Kamash malon, that's the chiddush of Rav, that you can plant them together as zrayim. Frekte Gemara, zrayim sol kedaitach. The vegetables of the Mara mentioned in the Mishnah are seeds. They're not vegetables. Vatnan yerakis. The Mishnah is saying that they're called vegetables. V'tani bakapara yerakis. Bakapara refers to them as vegetables. V'tani de Shmuel yerakis. Shmuel calls them vegetables. So they're all vegetables. And it says the Gemara, a different pshat. Chazeres itztrichelei. The chiddush of Rav was regarding lettuce. Why? What's unique about lettuce? I would think to say, Hoyel v'soifa lahakshos. What did we say before about lettuce? Why is there a mitzvah especially to take lettuce? When you plant the lettuce, it's all soft. But then there's a stalk that grows bigger and thick and hard. So I would think that because you have a stalk that grows in the lettuce when it ripens and it gets hard and big, so nesev le'rav chetfei, it's going to need more space to separate between one lettuce and another. Lavam Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, didn't Rabbi Yossi say a similar thing about the stalk of a cabbage? Kelach shel kruv, the stalk of cabbage, shehuksha, that becomes hard and wide, marchivun le'beis roiva. You have to have a space of a beis roiva, of a quarter of a kav around it. The space that was mentioned before about the 6 tvachim. And you have a 3 tvachim between one plant and another, that's not going to be good enough. Because over here it has a stalk that becomes thick and big. So maybe I would say, the sehachanami, maybe the same thing applies to the stalk of chazeres. Nesev le'rav chetfei, that it has to have more space. Kamash malon, that was the chiddush of Rav, that we don't compare the stalk of the kruv, of the cabbage, to the stalk of the lettuce, and you don't have to have extra space. The Gemara goes back to the next thing that it said in the Mishnah. Yotzim behen bein lachin ben yeveshin. You can be yotze the mitzvah of marer, whether it's moist, whether it's regular vegetables, or it's dried up. Rav Chisda says, Rav Chisda, leishanu ela bekelach. This that the Mishnah says that you can be yotze with the marer even if it's dry, that's only regarding the stalk of the marer. Aval ba'alin, it comes to the leaves of it. Lachin in, if it's moist, you can be yotze, yeveshin, but if it's dried up, loy, you can't be yotze. And Rashi explains the difference is, when it comes to the leaves, once it becomes totally dry, there's no bitterness to it, there's no taste anymore. So how can you be yotze? When it comes to the kelach, the stalk, even when it gets dry, is thick enough that there's still inside some taste of bitterness in it. So you still could be yotze. Frekte Gemara, but v'ha mediktani seife bekelach shalahen. In our Mishnah, it brings up the fact that you can use the stalk only in the seife, in the end of the Mishnah. Meklal de reisha. So that would seem that in the reisha, when it speaks about soft and moist and dry, allen, It's speaking about the leaves, not about the stalk. And says the Gemara, no, we're going to Purushi Kamefarish. The Sefer is clarifying and explaining what it said in the Reisha. Ki katani ben lachem ben yeveshin. When it says in the Reisha that you can use it whether it's moist, whether it's dry, akelach. It only refers to the stalk that's mentioned in the Sefer. Meisvei, the Gemara asks from a Braise, it says Yaitzin Bahen. You could be Yaitz with all these kinds from Marer, Ubekelach, and also with the stalk, Shalahen, Bein Lachim, Bein Yeveshin, whether it's dry, whether it's moist. Divrei Rab Meir. So from here the Gemara is going to bring the Raya. It says Yaitzin Bahen, and then it adds also Kelach, also the stalk, and it says whether dry, whether moist. So it seems like even the leaves, even if it's dry, it could be Yaitza. The Gemara brings the rest of the Braise. V'chachamim Maimrim, Lachin Yaitzin Ben, if it's moist, you could be Yaitza. Yeveshin, if it's dry, there's no bitterness, and Yaitzin Ben. V'shavin, everybody agrees, she Yaitzin Ben Kemushin, that you'll be Yaitza even if it's withered. Avaloi Kvushin, but not if it's pickled. V'loi Shlukin, not if it's heavily cooked and it dissolves. V'loi Mevushalin, and not even cooked at all. Klali Shaldava, the point here is, Kol Dava Sheyesh By Ta'am Marer, if it still has a bitter taste to it, Yaitzin By. So then you can be Yaitza. V'chol she'ein by tam marer, it doesn't have the bitter taste anymore, ain't Yaitzin by. And that's the reason why if it's cooked, you're not Yaitza, because the bitterness goes away. So simply here in the Reisha, as I mentioned, it seems like that when it says whether dry, whether moist, it refers even to the leaves of the marer. So the Gemara says, no, we're going to have to say, tirgema akelach. When it mentions over there dry and moist, it's only referring to the stalk, but not to the leaves themselves. And this is the halacha of Shulchan Aruch. You can't be Yaitza marer with dry leaves. If it has no taste of it, you can't be Yaitza. Again, I skipped something. Taner Rabbanan. Another line over here. Ein Yaitza ben Kimushin. You're not Yaitza with marer that's withered. Misham Rabbi Eliezer bar Tzadok Amru. Yaitza ben Kimushin. You could be Yaitza with the marer which is withered. Okay, when Shulchan Aruch the pasuk is actually you can't be Yaitza with marer that's withered.
What's withered?
It how would I explain? Withered,
like flakes away when it flakes away.
No, that's already totally dry.
To soften it.
A little
Yeah,
bit.
it gets like
Stale.
yeah. I had actually this year someone came to me to ask me for marer. I asked him what happened. What do you need marer for? So he said that he had his marer placed in the fridge in a place where the cold air comes out, and the fridge wasn't circulating properly, and the whole marer became like soggy and whatever. So he couldn't use his marer. You're not yaitza with marer, not if it's totally dry, not if it's kemushin, withered. So it has to be fresh leaves that has the proper taste, the bitter taste. Yeah. This is a discussion we had before by Arichis regarding matzah. Could you be yaitza matzah of Ma'aseh Sheni? So the Gemara brings up the same question regarding marer. Could you use marer from Ma'aseh Sheni that's in Yerushalayim? So the Gemara explains now what the basis of this question is. According to Rabbi Akiva, this is not at all a question. Why not? Hashta b'matzah da'iraisa nafik matzah minatayra. You could be yaitza with marer, you could be yaitz with Ma'aseh Sheni, that is. But marer de Rabbana mibaye, marer de Rabbana, you for sure could be yaitz. So Rashi explains the pshat of the Gemara when it says here the Rabbanan versus the Iraisa, it's referring to the Ma'aseh Sheni. There is no meiser for marer because it's a vegetable. Matzah is a grain, there's the tfuah, so there's meiser for that. So what the Gemara is saying is, if it's Ma'aseh Sheni minatayre, so still you could be yaitz the mitzvah of matzah according to Rabbi Akiva. For sure, marer, where the whole, it's not really ma'aseh minatayra. Min derabanan it's ma'aseh. So for sure you could be yaitz with it. The question is according to Rabbi Yossi Galili. What's going to be the halacha? What does Rabbi Yossi Galili hold? You can't be yaitz with matzah from Ma'aseh Sheni. So should I say b'matzah da'iraisahu by matzah where the Ma'aseh Sheni is minatayra? So who do nafik? That's what you're not yaitz. Aval marer the rabbanan nafik. Marer, which is the Ma'aseh Sheni, is only with the Rabbanan, you will be Yaitze. Or perhaps there's no distinction. Called the Tekinu Rabbanan Ke'en De'iraisa Tikun. When Chachamim make their takana, it's similar to the takana min HaTeireh, and if the Ma'aseh Sheni min HaTeireh can't be used for matzah, the Ma'aseh Sheni min the Rabbanan can't be used for marer. Omar Rava says Rava, Mistavre, matzah u'marer. The svara is that we compare matzah and marer one to another. If you can't be Yaitze Ma'aseh Sheni with matzah with Ma'aseh Sheni, that is, you can't be Yaitze marer with Ma'aseh Sheni either. That's the maskana of the Gemara. This is one pshat of Rashi. Rashi does bring a second pshat that when the Gemara here says matzah d'iraisa and mara d'rabbanon, it's not referring to the ma'aseh sheni being d'iraisa and d'rabbanon. It's referring to the mitzvah of matzah and mitzvah of mara. Bisman hazeh matzahs min ha'Torah, because it says be'erev toichlu matzahs. But mara bisman hazeh is only midrabbanon because it's only the mitzvah midaraisa is only together with the korban pesach, not without the korban pesach. That's another pshat Rashi says. But Rashi doesn't accept that pshat. Okay, we'll stop over here for today.